thank you, Hannes, for the introduction and the invitation to give this presentation. I would also like to welcome everyone who is now connected. Okay, I must now start the presentation. I don't know whether I see my slides. I start the presentation modus.
Perfect.
Okay, you see now my slides?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. The topic today is artificial intelligence and nuclear war risk. Now one technical little problem, but now it's okay. And so, at first, some remarks about the content. The presentation will have 3 parts. First, I will treat the risk of accidental nuclear war that can be caused by early warning and decision-making systems. Here, too, I will focus in particular on aspects of artificial intelligence. In the second part, I will deal with the warnings about artificial intelligence. And in the third part, I would like to suggest what could be done to reduce the risks. I need more time for the first part than for the parts 2 and 3. In the course of the presentation, I will discuss some of the risks associated with artificial intelligence. To avoid any misunderstandings, however, I would like to say now that I take a very positive view of AI. Most AI applications are very positive and benefit people. For example, automatic translation systems such as DeepL. This is my first presentation in English for more than 30 years, so I'm not at all fit in English, but luckily there are systems like DeepL which helped me a lot in preparing for this presentation. Okay, so even if most AI applications are positive, we should also be aware of possible negative effects so that we can reduce the risks. I will now start with the accidental nuclear war. This risk arises from early warning systems that serve to detect an attack with nuclear weapons at an early stage. Such early warning systems are based on sensor data, such as radar systems and satellite surveillance, computer centers and communication networks for the analysis and transmission of data, command centers to evaluate warning information and the threat situation and to plan and order actions. However, errors can occur in such early warning systems, for example, caused by computer errors, whereby a false alarm is reported that means an attack with nuclear missiles, although there is no threat. This could possibly lead to a nuclear war by mistake. The risk exists in particular in the case of a launch on warning strategy. The high targeting accuracy of modern weapons could lead to a situation that missile silos and command centers are destroyed with the first strike. This could prevent secondary impact capability, and therefore it could be considered to launch one's own missiles before the enemy's missiles hit and make a counter strike more difficult or impossible. There have sometimes been threats of such a launch on warning strategy. However, there was probably never a fixed strategy, but a decision was made depending on the situation, depending on the second strike capability, the political situation, and what was currently expected of a potential enemy. The next slide shows some cases of false alarms. In 1962, during the Cuba crisis, there were several alarms and incidents. I think well known is the case of Arshipov, who prevented the launch of a nuclear weapon from a submarine. In 1979, there was a message of a mass attack because a simulation program was used without informing the staff in the monitoring unit. In June 1980, it occurred 2 times that mass attack was reported. This was caused by a hardware error. Best known here is an incident from the 26th of September in 1983. In a Russian early warning system occurred a false alarm reporting an attack with 5 nuclear missiles. The officer on duty, Stanislav Petrov, decided that this is a false alarm, although the systems appeared to be working correctly. Petrov did not report this alarm to the superiors, and so he perhaps prevented an unintended nuclear war. In 1995 occurred an alarm, and as a consequence of this, Boris Yeltsin activated the nuclear suitcase and put the launch codes ready. In December 2020, a missile alarm occurred in Ramstein in Germany. This alarm message was broadcast over the loudspeaker system and could no longer be kept secret. False alarms are usually not made public, but are subject of confidentiality. Okay, a false alarm as a single event in peacetime is not critical and should not lead to a nuclear war by accident. There have been several critical situations in the past, and fortunately nothing has happened so far. The risk of accidental nuclear war increases if there is a crisis situation regarding the global political situation, possibly combined with nuclear threats, if unusual errors occur, if several events occur simultaneously that could be put into context to the alarm message, or if acting persons make misjudgments. The current confrontation between the West on the one hand and Russia and China on the other is leading to a new arms race, especially in such important technology fields as AI and cyberspace. Every nation must be at the front of these fields and be able to keep up with every potential enemy. Weapons in connection with artificial intelligence and cyberspace are software-based weapons and have special properties. The development takes place in sequence, and there can be any number of variants and copies. Arms control and arms agreements are difficult and almost impossible to verify. Distribution is difficult to control. Software can be distributed in encrypted form by the internet. Disarmament is difficult. Anonymous weapons which are developed now will always remain. Software cannot be destroyed. There can always many copies remain. The risk of accidental nuclear war will increase. New technical developments such as the weaponization of space, hypersonic missiles, cyber warfare capabilities, and more artificial intelligence through to autonomous weapon systems are increasing the complexity of early warning systems and possible threat situations to such an extent that alarm messages are becoming very difficult to evaluate. The overall system of early warning components and nuclear weapons is becoming very difficult to control. an increasing number of objects in the airspace, the growing variety of object types in the airspace, and ever shorter warning times, for example, due to hypersonic weapons, have the consequences that the evaluation of sensor data is becoming very difficult. AI methods are therefore increasingly required to evaluate threat situations. However, the data, information, and information basis for such AI decisions is vague, uncertain, and incomplete. Therefore, even AI systems cannot make reliable decisions in such situations. With the help of examples, I will now explain the difference between vagueness and uncertainty. At first, an example for vagueness. If X is a heavy car, then X needs lots of fuel. The question is here, what does heavy mean? And what does lots of mean? In this example, the statements X is a heavy car and X needs lots of fuel cannot simply be assigned to the truth values true or false. The properties are vague, and the truth value could be represented here as any value that means a real number between 0 and 1, where 0 stands for false and 1 for true. The next sample concerns uncertainty. If X is a car and Y is the owner of X, then Y is the current user of X. Such a rule does not always be valid. There can be exceptions. The user of a car could be a child of the owner. Also in companies, owner and user can be different. So such a value is uncertain. It does not always apply, but it is valid with a certain probability. Our everyday knowledge is usually vague and uncertain. Early warning systems are based on lots of sensors and lots of input data. However, the information is incomplete, vague, and uncertain. It's incomplete because, for example, information may be missing due to electronic warfare. The size of radar signals and the brightness of missile signals are vague. And the detection of object types and object characteristics are uncertain. Therefore, assumptions are required, and such assumptions might be wrong. Artificial intelligence research has developed methods to deal with the different types of knowledge and their level of credibility. That means such methods can handle vague, uncertain, and incomplete data, but the conclusions are then not certainly valid, but only probable. For example, methods of plausible inference can be applied in AI, but such conclusions are then only valid with a certain probability and can be wrong. Such AI decisions are often based on hundreds of features and no simple reasoning is possible. Therefore, humans will not be able to verify such decisions in the short time available. All they can do is believe what the machine delivers. The problem of uncertainty cannot be solved with artificial intelligence either. Neither humans nor machines can surely evaluate such threat situations. Important for the evaluation of threat situations is therefore a certain value of trust and also expectations. That means answering the question whether this can happen given to the current political situation. Could artificial intelligence perhaps help evaluating the political situation? Well, the assessment of the global political situation is the subject of a project called Preview, which the German armed forces launched in March 2018 with the aim of predicting crises and wars on the basis of artificial intelligence methods. For this purpose, large amounts of data are used, internet sources, as well as military and economic databases, and also intelligence information will be evaluated. The type of data used covers a wide spectrum, including trade data, market prices, demographic developments, crime rates, opinions in social networks, or data on political violence. Even though such projects like the preview project may be useful for the early detection of potential crises, for example, in Africa, and there is currently no evidence of a connection with early warning and decision-making systems for nuclear threats. Such a connection might possibly occur in the future if in an early warning system reports a missile attack, and this situation is assessed over several alert levels in the relevant crisis meetings, it is quite possible that commissioners will also have access to such a system for predicting war. If the AI system predicts war in such a situation, this can have significant impact on the assessment of the alert by the commissioners. And we can try to answer the question, what decision would Stanislav Petrov have made in 1983 if he had access to such a system like preview? Perhaps it would have been much more difficult for him to make the decision he did. However, the databases of preview is highly uncertain and incomplete. Therefore, the conclusions can be highly uncertain. That means can be wrong. Perhaps such a system could be useful to advise politicians how to prevent or stop wars. But such a system should never be used in early warning systems for nuclear threats. Okay. In early warning systems for nuclear threats, there can be dangerous interactions between artificial intelligence, autonomous weapons, cyber attacks, and nuclear weapons. Threat situations are extremely complex and decision-making timeframes are very short. Therefore, such situations can become unmanageable for humans. The risk of accidental nuclear war will increase, especially in crisis situations. The consequences of climate change will increasingly lead to crisis. If an accidental nuclear war will occur at some point, it will be sudden and unpredictable, just like an accident. Okay. Now I come to the second part, warnings about AI. There have been a few warnings about AI this year. In late March 2023, the Future of Life Institute published an open letter warning of AI risks and calling for a 6-month pause on certain AI developments. AI scientists have proposed this pause to examine what impact such developments could have on humans. This was followed at the end of May by the warning that AI could lead to the destruction of humanity. At the beginning of July, leading employees of OpenAI, the company that developed ChatGPT, wrote that a superintelligence could emerge before the end of this decade. The media response to these warnings was very low. We now see the statement. This is the statement from May 30th. It was just only one sentence. Mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. Okay, the statement on the risk possibly caused by AI was signed by heads of large IT or AI companies and by AI scientists. Some of them are listed on this slide. This includes, for example, the heads of OpenAI and Google DeepMind. The list also includes Stuart Russell and Peter Norvig, the authors of the world's most important textbook on AI for several decades. Okay, the one sentence of the statement does not say what kind of risks could be involved, and further publications indicate that the emergence of a superintelligence is considered particularly dangerous. Superintelligence means a system that clearly exceeds human intelligence in almost all areas. However, AI successes may also have other risks, such as autonomous weapon systems, interactions between AI and nuclear weapons. I have already covered this in the part 1 of my presentation. Then revolution in warfare through AI. This is seen as third revolution after gunpowder and nuclear weapons. Then biological and chemical weapons developed with AI, disinformation and manipulation, and also superintelligence. Not all of these risks pose a threat to all of humanity as expressed in the one sentence statement. However, such a threat may exist if a superintelligence is successfully developed, or if nuclear weapons are used, possibly accidentally, in connection with AI decisions. A pandemic based on biological weapons could also reach extreme effects. Some of these risks may have an impact on early warning systems and nuclear forces, and may increase the risk of accidental nuclear war. This could concern disinformation and cyber attack, or autonomous weapon systems, for example, autonomous unmanned submarines possibly armed with nuclear weapons. Okay. In the past, prominent persons have claimed that AI is more dangerous than nuclear weapons. This comparison referred in particular to the risk of a possible superintelligence. We now compare these risks according to 3 aspects. At first, we regard the development goals. For nuclear weapons goals, the goal was the development of a weapon designed to destroy and kill. Now we consider superintelligence. The goal is not to develop a weapon. Instead, every step towards it is positive, bringing great benefits to humanity. However, such a development could get out of control. If such a system reaches a certain level, it could keep improving itself and become far superior to us in a short time. The next aspect is control. The following applies to nuclear weapons. With the development result, man retained control. So far, humans have decided whether to use nuclear weapons or not to use nuclear weapons. If sometime the development of a superintelligence is reached, humans will lose the control over this completely, and there is then no more possibility to prevent negative effects. In the most important textbook on artificial intelligence for decades, Stuart Russell and Peter Norvig write about this. Almost every technology has the potential to do harm in the wrong hands. But for artificial intelligence and robotics, we have the new problem that the wrong hands can belong to the technology itself. And at last, we regard the third aspect, possible effects. For at first for nuclear weapons. The effects are locally limited to one city or one region, as was the case, for example, in Hiroshima. However, if many nuclear weapons are used and a nuclear winter occurs, then the effects are not locally limited, but all of humanity may be affected. In case of a superintelligence, the effects are global in any case and can affect all mankind. Okay, leaders at OpenAI warned in early July 23 that a superintelligence could emerge before the end of this decade. Even if this were to occur, the question is in what form potential hazards might occur. At present, it is difficult to imagine that such systems will already have complete power over us in the near future, for example, in the form of robot armies. Preliminary stages of a superintelligence with great capabilities in linguistic communication as well as programming can be achieved very soon. And such systems can then constantly improve themselves and could achieve, among other things, previously unknown cyber attacks or internet manipulation capabilities. Such systems could then be misused by people or states, or even become active themselves and dominate the flow of information on the internet, thus destroy human information flows. Thus, with the help of or through AI systems, information dominance could be achieved that would affect all areas, including finance. As a result, finance and commerce could collapse, at least temporarily, and our societies could become unstable. If nuclear weapon states get into existential emergency situations in this context, the risk of nuclear war would increase considerably. Since the dependence on technical systems is now very great, which always applies to communication on the internet, worldwide crisis would be the consequence, and such critical situation errors and such critical situation and in such critical situations, errors in early warning systems for nuclear threats could easily lead to a nuclear war by mistake. There are some very interesting books about superintelligence. Some I've shown here. All these books are written from experts in AI, and for all these books, there are also English versions available. Okay. In the past, predictions about the development goals in AI often did not come true or have come true significantly later. In some cases, goals were also achieved faster than expected. It is impossible to estimate if and when a superintelligence would emerge. The consequences would also be completely incalculable. Corresponding events of the risks described here will occur rather suddenly. Serious consequences could then occur within a few weeks or months with no possibility of stopping them. There will probably be no indication or evidence of the dangerous nature of certain AI implications beforehand. The possibility of waiting for such events to occur and only then acting to reduce the risk may no longer exist. Okay, I will come now to the third part, possible measures to reduce the risk. At first, again, to the confrontation cause. The war in Ukraine and the confrontation between the West on the one hand and Russia and China on the other hand are leading to an enormous arms race. Should this arms race continue? Should we continue to develop even better weapons in terms of AI, including autonomous weapon systems and cyber weapons? Should we improve even the nuclear weapons? Should space weaponization progress further? Should we allow biological weapons to be developed, possibly with the help of AI? Or should we prevent such an arms race? How? How much time is left? The consequences of the current course of confrontation, are in any case dangerous types of weapons are being developed further, becoming even more dangerous. And concerning superintelligence, the warnings about AI have also been registered in other countries where increased efforts are also being made in this direction, for example, in China, India, Russia, and perhaps in other countries. Many nations also want to be able to keep up in this area. Risks are increasing in many areas, including the risks of nuclear war. Therefore, the course of confrontation should be ended. Can this be achieved in supplying ever more effective weapons to war zones? I don't think so. Okay. Important demands of the peace movement are to stop nuclear sharing and implement a ban on nuclear weapons. However, there are questions. Is that enough? Is this currently achievable? Or are the necessary preconditions lacking? Important demands should be disarmament and arms control of nuclear weapons, effective agreements against climate change, agreements on cyber weapons and autonomous weapons, and a regulation of artificial intelligence. The necessary prerequisites for achieving something concerning such demands are effective agreements are only positive with Russia and China and not against them. Therefore, the confrontation course must be stopped as soon as possible. Wars should be ended and negotiations conducted. However, frequent counter arguments are talks and negotiations are not possible with Putin. Only military strength will help. If Putin is not defeated now, he will continue to attack other states, including NATO states. If this would be true, Putin would risk a war against NATO and thus a nuclear war. If Putin would really do this, he would not allow Russia to be defeated now without using nuclear weapons. If that would be the case, then there would perhaps be no solution. What can we do when a solution is absolutely necessary? Perhaps mathematics can help. This slide shows a linear system of equations with m equations and n variables. The following applies in such a system of equations. If m equals n, then there's usually exactly one solution. If m is less than n, then there are many solutions. And if m is greater than n, that means if there are more equations than variables, then there is usually no solution. Okay. So if m is greater than m, there is usually no solution. What to do when solutions are urgently needed? For example, to enable negotiations and end wars. We have to reduce the number of equations, that means conditions, and to increase the number of variables, for example, by turning constants into variables. That means our demand on politicians could therefore be reduce conditions and turn constants into variables. Okay, we now come to another aspect. Since the beginning of war in Ukraine, it was repeatedly claimed that the strategy of change through trade has failed. In German, Wandel durch Handel. The statement change through trade is perhaps also an unfavorable term from a security policy perspective. The aim should not be to change others, but to work together to achieve the necessary security for the future. It might therefore be better to use the term security through trade. Has security through trade failed? Or should a distinction be made between necessary and sufficient conditions, as we know from mathematics? Mathematics can have in many cases. If a statement A is sufficient for a statement B, then the following applies. A implies B, that means if A, then B. If a statement A is necessary for a statement B, then the following applies. A and B implies A. That means if B, then A. The conclusions here therefore apply in exactly the opposite direction. The security through trade strategy was not sufficient to prevent the war in Ukraine. This would have required further measures, but such a strategy is necessary to reduce the risk of further escalation and further military conflicts. Security through trade is necessary to achieve a certain degree of global security in the long term and thus a more peaceful world. And also security policy experts say such things. They say they say that such economic relations are important for global security. Here is a quote from the German book Sicherheitspolitik verstehen, translated Understanding Security Policy. The authors are retired Lieutenant General Kersten Lahl and Johannes Warwick, a professor of international relations. In the book, they emphasize the importance of international interdependencies, for example, to deter cyber attacks. They write, this is translated with deep L, international interdependencies. This approach takes advantage of the realization that in a globally networked world, any violent confrontation only produces losers on the bottom line. The more the players are economically, technologically, culturally, and possibly also military networked with each other, the less chance there is of achieving one-sided advantages through aggression. This idea, which is often wrongly perceived as naive, thus amounts to a kind of self-deterrence. The options proposed by Lahl and Warwick are not only relevant in the context of cyber attacks, but also with regard to other threats such as autonomous weapons, nuclear weapons, and so on. And then another point, important foundations of arms control in the recent decades have been mutual control and the exchange of information, for example, on the basis of open skies. In recent decades, there has also been a good scientific exchange between almost all nations. This led to a certain degree of transparency in research. Scientific exchange also means close contact between the people involved. This also reinforces the tendency of scientists not to participate in military projects. Civil clauses at university have also contributed to this. not only have agreements such as open skies being terminated, but scientific cooperation with Russia and China has also recently been severely restricted. This makes research and development in important fields such as artificial intelligence less transparent. Less scientific exchange also means less contact between the people involved, and as a result, scientists could become more willing to participate in armaments projects. This could also accelerate an arms race in AI. Okay. There are many threats. There are many things which we can do to reduce the risks. Improving trust, communication, and cooperation between all nations is very important, and this can take place on many levels: political, scientific, technological, economic, culture, sport, town training, school exchange, and also on the private level. Due to globalization and economic cooperation, wars should no longer be possible in the sense of self-deterrence. If this has not been enough to prevent a certain war, it does not mean that the principle is wrong. Okay. There may be several serious risks in the near future. Climate change, conflicts and wars in various regions. There's always the risk of escalation in crises and conflicts, including with regard to nuclear weapons, and this can lead to a nuclear war by accident. There are also many risks associated with AI, including disinformation on the internet and superintelligence. Terrorists could use biological weapons which are developed with the help of AI, and so on. Solutions and a reduction of such risks are only possible together with all nations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.